Hi, I'm Mackenzie. My high school classmates seated me at the losers table during our 15-year reunion, tucked behind a column where no one could see me. No explanation, no apology, just deliberate exclusion, like I was still the awkward scholarship kid they tormented years ago. What they didn't know, I had just landed my private jet at the small municipal airport 10 minutes away. But the worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was realizing that this had always been the pattern. Diminish me quietly, one interaction at a time, until I was invisible to everyone in the room. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't flip tables. I just sat there with my name tag crooked on my simple black dress. And what I did next, preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Well, let's just say it made those high school walls shake. Before we begin, what would you have done in my shoes? And where are you watching from today? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. It was early autumn in Lakeside, Michigan, one of those perfect October evenings where the air smelled like wood smoke and apples, and the sunset painted Lake Michigan gold and crimson. The maple trees around Lakeside High were already showing their colors, branches heavy with red and orange leaves that would soon scatter across the football field. I kept my outfit understated and my makeup minimal. Nothing flashy. Just a simple black cocktail dress and the small silver bracelet my father gave me before his final deployment. I already suspected I wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms, and I had no intention of giving them more ammunition. Inside, the gymnasium had been transformed with white tablecloths and twinkling lights. The basketball hoops were hidden behind blue and gold banners, our school colors, and a DJ played hits from 15 years ago. Wine glasses clinked against plastic cups. Forced laughter competed with the music. The scent of catered chicken, marsala mingled with expensive cologne and old insecurities that never quite faded. The entire class of 2010 had gathered for this milestone reunion, their excuse to showcase their accomplishments and relive the glory days when social hierarchies were simple and cruelly efficient. 2 weeks ago, I almost didn't RSVP. The invitation arrived in my San Francisco office with a generic, "We hope you can make it," scrawled in what I recognized as Brittany Taylor's handwriting. That said enough, but my childhood friend Marcus might attend. That was the only reason I considered going. I stayed near the entrance, watching familiar strangers circulate like predictable satellites in their social orbits. Brittany, our former head cheerleader, was holding court near the makeshift bar, laughing with her chin tilted up, diamond earrings catching the light. Trent, our star quarterback and now a pharmaceutical sales manager, stood beside her in an expensive suit that stretched tight across his shoulders, his class ring still gleaming on his right hand. He'd always had a way of dominating any space. Without saying much, I tried not to draw attention as I approached the check-in table. The woman seated there, was it Jessica? Jennifer? Barely looked up. She rifled through the name cards with a bored expression. Mackenzie. Her perfectly manicured finger paused. Mackenzie Porter? I nodded. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe even discomfort. You actually came. It wasn't a question. She handed me a name tag with Mackenzie Porter, class of 2010, printed beneath the school logo. No mention of the military service award I'd received at graduation. Nothing about my rank or service. Just my name, like I was an afterthought. Table 17, she said, already looking past me to the next arrival. I glanced at the table map. 17 wasn't even on it. I scanned the room, finally spotting a small table partially hidden behind a decorative column, far from the stage, and the dance floor. A single 17 card sat in the center, tilted against a small vase holding a single, wilting daisy. Someone tapped a microphone, calling for everyone's attention. Chairs scraped back as people found their assigned seats. I settled at table 17 alone, watching as tables filled with laughing groups of 6 and 8. My table had 3 empty chairs besides mine. I sipped my sparkling water and pretended to check my phone. Brittany stepped onto the small stage, radiant in a blue sequined dress that matched her eyes. The room quieted. "Welcome home, Lakeside Lions," she exclaimed, arms wide. "Can you believe it's been 15 years?" Cheers erupted. I sat still, feeling the familiar invisibility cloak settle over me. Tonight is about reconnecting, celebrating, and remembering what made our class so special. More applause. Someone whistled. The slideshow began. Photos from our high school years flashed across the screen. Football games, prom, graduation. I searched for my face among the images but found nothing. Not even the community service project I'd organized senior year, which had made the front page of the local paper. Not the state debate championship. Certainly nothing about my enlistment after graduation, when I'd stood proud in my new uniform, while most of them were preparing for college parties. The screen flickered. A group photo appeared. Our senior trip to Chicago. I was there, on the edge, partially cropped out but still visible if you knew where to look. Then came a screenshot of a recent group chat. A message from Brittany time-stamped just yesterday. "Table 17's behind the column. She probably won't show anyway. Military people always have PTSD or something, right? Better safe than sorry." No one gasped outright, but the sudden silence was deafening. Brittany's smile faltered as she realized what had appeared on screen. The tech guy fumbled with the controls, quickly advancing to the next slide. A few people shifted uncomfortably, in their seats. Trent coughed into his hand and took a long drink. No one looked my way. I sat frozen, staring at Brittany, then at the screen. She recovered quickly, continuing her speech as if nothing had happened. If anything, her smile grew brighter, more determined. A practiced defense mechanism. Moments later, as dinner was being served, I noticed Trent approaching my table. He moved with the same confident swagger, though his hairline had receded since high school. He stopped beside me, not quite meeting my eyes. "Hey, Mackenzie. Long time." I nodded, waiting. "So, military, huh?" "That's different." I took a small sip of water. 8 years, 2 tours. He nodded like he understood, though I knew he didn't. "Listen, there's been a mix-up with the seating. We need this table for some of the planning committee members. Would you mind—" Before I could answer, 2 servers appeared, already collecting my untouched plate and water glass. I stood slowly, conscious of the eyes pretending not to watch. "Where should I go?" I asked, my voice steady. Trent gestured vaguely toward the back of the room. "Maybe near the exit. We're pretty tight on space with the RSVPs and all." I gathered my small clutch purse, the leather soft beneath my fingers. Inside was my phone, currently connected to the pilot waiting at the airport. I'd planned to stay. Only an hour anyway, just long enough to see Marcus before flying to my meeting in New York tomorrow morning. A waiter approached, obviously uncomfortable. "Ma'am, would you like me to help you find somewhere else to sit?" I didn't move immediately. My gaze drifted across the room to where Brittany was laughing with her former cheerleading squad, her hand resting possessively on Trent's empty chair. The same laugh that had echoed down hallways when I wore the same thrift store jeans 3 days in a row because we couldn't afford more. The same dismissive gesture she'd used when I was awarded the scholarship she thought her family name deserved. I stood, straightened my dress, and nodded politely at the waiter. "I'm fine, thank you." My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from my pilot, Cameron. "Ready when you are, boss." I moved toward the exit, feeling strangely weightless. This wasn't new. When I was 16, they'd removed my name from the honor roll display because it disrupted alphabetical order. At 18, my acceptance to West Point was dismissed as probably some diversity quota thing. At 23, my first combat medal wasn't mentioned in the town paper that still found space for Trent's Regional Sales Award. Outside, the night air felt clean against my skin. The stars had emerged, countless points of light above the small town that had never quite fit me. I walked slowly to my rental car, the heels of my sensible shoes clicking against the pavement. The same pavement where I'd once run track in worn-out sneakers, determined to earn a scholarship any way possible. I sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine, staring at the illuminated gymnasium. Music and laughter spilled from the open doors. Someone, probably Brittany, had cranked up their song from senior year. Through the windows, I could see them forming a circle on the dance floor, arms linked, heads thrown back in laughter. My absence already forgotten, or perhaps celebrated. I pulled out my phone and dialed Cameron. Still waiting at the municipal. "Boss, everything okay?" I watched a shooting star trace a bright path across the Michigan sky. "Change of plans. Bring the jet to the school's football field. There's plenty of room." The football field? At a high school? Cameron's voice held surprise but no judgment. He'd been my pilot long enough to trust my decisions. "Yes, the lights are still on from the game earlier. You've landed in tighter spots in Kandahar." "Roger that. ETA 12 minutes. I didn't always have power, but I learned how to use it without seeking validation. I stepped out of the car and leaned against the hood, gazing upward. There it was, my Gulfstream G650, its navigation lights blinking against the night sky, descending toward Lakeside High School's football field. They didn't know. Not Brittany, not Trent, not the classmates who pretended I didn't exist. They didn't know that the awkward scholarship kid now owned one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity firms in the country, that the girl they'd seated behind a column had briefed 3 presidents and secured military networks across 2 war zones. I held my phone loosely, feeling the cool metal against my palm. If silence is what they wanted, I'd give them the kind that comes after thunder. I didn't always have this composure. The drive back to my hotel was a blur of streetlights and memories. My knuckles whitened against the steering wheel as I navigated the familiar roads of Lakeside. Streets I once walked carrying textbooks too heavy for my frame, dodging remarks about my father's deployments and my mother's second job at the diner. As soon as the door of my hotel suite closed behind me, the weight of the evening settled across my shoulders. I dropped my keys on the marble countertop and let my purse slip from my fingers onto the king-sized bed. The room was larger than the entire apartment my mother and I had shared when I was in high school. I'd booked it without thinking, not to show off, just because space had become something I needed after years in cramped barracks and forward operating bases. I kicked off my heels and padded barefoot to the window. From the 10th floor, I could see the lights of Lakeside High in the distance, still glowing like a beacon. Beyond it, the faint outline of my jet on the football field, illuminated by the stadium lights I'd arranged to have activated. Cameron had executed the landing perfectly. He always did. The local news would be there soon. A private jet landing at a high school reunion wasn't exactly routine in a town with 3 traffic lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Where'd you go? Everyone's talking about a plane landing on the field. Tell me that's not yours." Smiled despite myself. Marcus had been the only genuine friend I had in that school. The quiet band kid who shared his lunch with me when mine wasn't enough, who never treated my scholarship status as a deficiency. I hadn't told him about my success, not the scale of it anyway. He knew I'd done well after the military, but not that the cybersecurity algorithm I developed during my second tour had become the backbone of a company now valued at $8 billion. "Sorry I missed you," I texted back. "Had to make an entrance somehow." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "Holy shit, Mac. Brittany's freaking out. Trent's trying to get to the field to see who it is." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. Same hazel eyes. Same scatter of freckles across my nose that Brittany had once called dirt spots. loud enough for everyone to hear. Same scar along my jawline from the IED that took 2 of my unit members in Afghanistan. I traced it gently, remembering Lieutenant Rodriguez's laugh, Specialist Chen's terrible jokes. The reunion seemed suddenly small, inconsequential compared to what I'd seen, what I'd lost, what I'd built from nothing. I shed my black dress and stepped into the shower, letting hot water wash away the lingering tension. By the time I emerged, wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, 3 more messages had appeared on my phone. From Cameron. Secured the aircraft. Locals are curious but respectful. Town's police chief says he remembers you from high school. Dixon's kid? Says to tell you hello. From Marcus. Whoever's in that plane has the whole reunion losing their minds. Please tell me you're watching this from somewhere. From an unknown number. Mackenzie Porter? This is Brittany Taylor from the reunion committee. We noticed you left early. There seems to be some confusion about a private aircraft. Please call me back urgently. I set the phone down without responding and pulled a worn leather journal from my suitcase. The pages were filled with entries dating back to basic training. My thoughts, plans, algorithms sketched in margins. I flipped to a blank page and wrote today's date, followed by a single line. Some spaces aren't worth reclaiming. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No dreams of gunfire or explosions, no anxiety about the upcoming Pentagon contract. Just quiet, deep rest. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the hotel curtains I'd forgotten to close. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, most from numbers I didn't recognize, former classmates suddenly remembering my existence. 2 from Brittany, 1 from Trent. I ordered room service, fresh fruit, yogurt, strong coffee, and reviewed my schedule while waiting. The New York meeting had been pushed to Monday, giving me an unexpected day in Lakeside. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, put this town behind me again. But something kept me there. Not nostalgia, not even the satisfaction of knowing my jet had disrupted their carefully orchestrated event. Something else. Unfinished business, perhaps. As I sipped my coffee, a local news alert appeared on my tablet. Mystery aircraft lands at high school reunion. Locals speculate on billionaire. Visitor. The accompanying photo showed my Gulfstream gleaming under the stadium lights, its distinctive blue stripe visible along the fuselage. The article mentioned sources at the reunion, claiming the aircraft belonged to a former student who has made it big in tech circles. I smiled at the irony. For years I'd been invisible in this town. Now, without even being present, I was all they could talk about. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I tightened my robe and peered through the peephole. Marcus stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking exactly as he had 15 years ago, just with slightly less hair and slightly more around the middle. His kind eyes still crinkled at the corners. I opened the door, and he stared for a moment before breaking into a wide grin. "I knew it," he said, stepping forward to hug me. "The minute I saw that jet, I knew it had to be you." I returned his embrace, surprised by the sudden tightness in my throat. "Come in. Coffee?" Marcus settled into the armchair by the window, shaking, his head in disbelief as he looked around the suite. "So, billionaire, huh? That's new." I laughed, pouring him a cup of coffee. "Not quite. The company's valued at $8 billion. My stake is significantly less." "Still," he whistled low. "Far cry from the girl who used to study by flashlight to save on the electric bill." I nodded, settling across from him. Life takes unexpected turns. Like landing a private jet on our old football field? His eyes danced with amusement. Subtle. Subtlety is overrated. I sipped my coffee. "How bad is it?" "Oh, it's glorious chaos," Marcus chuckled. "Brittany's convinced it's some tech billionaire who's going to donate to her. Husband's campaign for state senate. Trent's telling everyone he always knew you'd do well, just not private jet well. The principal called an emergency meeting about proper aircraft authorization procedures. I couldn't help smiling. And you? What did you think when you saw it? Marcus's expression softened. I thought, finally, they'll see what I always saw in you. We spent the morning catching up. Marcus had stayed in Lakeside, teaching music at the middle school, raising 2 daughters with his husband. His life was quieter than mine, but no less meaningful. He showed me photos of his family, his modest home with the garden he'd always wanted. I showed him pictures of my company headquarters, my team, the Veterans Rehabilitation Center I'd funded in San Diego. You know they're planning to approach you at the second day of the reunion tonight, Marcus said as he prepared to leave. Brittany's organizing some kind of special recognition for you. Funny how a G650 changes people's perception. I walked him to the door. I haven't decided if I'm going. Whatever you decide. He squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Mac. Not because of the jet or the billions, because you survived them, then thrived without them. After Marcus left, I opened my laptop to check in with my executive team. 3 acquisition offers had come in overnight, larger tech companies eager to integrate our security protocols. My COO had handled them capably, but needed my input on the Pentagon proposal due next week. I spent 2 hours on video calls, reviewing code modifications and budget projections. It felt strange, directing operations that affected national security. From a hotel room overlooking the high school football field where I'd once run laps in secondhand sneakers, the same field where Brittany had once accidentally spilled bleach on my only good jacket during a pep rally. Around noon, I changed into jeans and a simple blouse, comfortable clothes, not meant to impress, and walked to my rental car. I had an appointment I'd scheduled before even arriving in Lakeside, one that had nothing to do with the reunion. The Lakeside Veterans Memorial stood at the edge of town, a simple stone monument with the names of local service members who had died in combat. I parked nearby and approached slowly, a small bouquet of white roses in hand. The memorial had been erected just before I left for basic training. My father's name was third from the bottom on the Afghanistan panel. I knelt and traced the letters. Sergeant First Class. James Porter. I had been 16 when the officers came to our door. My mother collapsed. I stood frozen, already understanding what their presence meant. Dad never came home from his 3rd deployment. Hey, Dad, I whispered, placing the roses at the base of the stone. Got that jet you always talked about. Remember how you said you'd fly me to Paris someday? The breeze rustled the nearby maple trees, sending a shower of orange leaves spiraling down around the memorial. I stayed there longer than I'd planned, telling my father's name about the company, my recent projects, the veterans I'd helped, things he would have been proud of, things that mattered more than private jets and billion-dollar valuations. I stood to leave. A familiar figure approached from across the park. Mrs. Harrington, my old English teacher. She'd aged considerably, her once dark hair now completely white, but her posture remained ramrod straight. She had been one of the few teachers who saw beyond my circumstances, who pushed me when others wrote me off. I thought that might be you, she said, her voice still carrying the same authority that had kept rowdy teenagers in line for decades. I heard about the mysterious jet. Figured if anyone from that class would show up in grand style, it would be you. I smiled. Not exactly my style, Mrs. Harrington. Just practical transportation. Practical, she repeated, her eyes twinkling. 8-passenger capacity, transcontinental range, and Rolls-Royce engines. Very practical indeed. I laughed despite myself. You've done your research. I always kept tabs on my promising students. She gestured to the memorial. He would be immensely proud, you know. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Will you be at tonight's continuation of the festivities? She asked. I hear they're scrambling to acknowledge your achievements now. I glanced back at the memorial, at my father's name etched in stone. Then at Mrs. Harrington, who had believed in me when belief was in short supply. "I haven't decided," I said. "Honestly," she patted my arm. "Whatever you choose, remember, success isn't about impressing those who dismissed you. It's about honoring those who believed in you all along." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. "Local authorities requesting flight plan if we're departing from the field. Are we staying, boss?" I looked back at the memorial, then toward the high school in the distance. The real question wasn't whether to attend tonight's event. It was what I wanted to accomplish if I did. I hadn't come to Lakeside seeking validation from people who never valued me. I hadn't built my company to impress former classmates. I'd done it because an IED in Kandahar showed me how fragile security could be, and because my father always told me that service continued long after the uniform came off. "Stand by," I texted Cameron. "Decision pending." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Lakeside's main street as I drove slowly through downtown. Not much had changed in 15 years. The same brick storefronts, the same faded awnings, the same American flag hanging outside the post office. I passed Gino's diner where my mother had worked double shifts, serving pie with a smile even, when her feet were swollen and her back ached. The help wanted sign still hung in the window, perpetually seeking someone desperate enough to work for tips that barely covered gas money. I parked outside the Lakeside Community Bank, a modest, two-story building with columns that had always seemed pretentious for such a small town. Inside, the air conditioning hummed aggressively, and the same faux marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights. A young teller looked up as I approached, her customer service smile firmly in place. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like to speak with the manager, please, regarding the Porter Scholarship Fund." Her smile faltered slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he'll want to see me." She disappeared through a door behind the counter, returning moments later with a balding man in his 60s. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized me. "Ms. Porter," he extended his hand. "Charles Dawson. We weren't expecting you until Monday." "I had some unexpected free time," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "I'd like to review the scholarship parameters before finalizing the endowment." He ushered me into a small conference room with outdated furniture and family photos on the wall. One showed a younger Dawson with his arm around Trent at some sporting event. "Of course. We're thrilled about your generosity," Dawson began, pulling out a leather portfolio. "A $1 million scholarship endowment will transform opportunities for our local students." I sat across from him, placing my own folder on the table. "I've been reviewing the draft agreement your office sent last month. I'd like to make some modifications." His smile remained fixed, but something flickered in his eyes. Concern, perhaps. "Of course, though we've structured it according to standard parameters for educational endowments." "I'm not interested in standard parameters," I said, opening my folder. "The current draft states that the scholarship committee will include the bank president, high school principal, and 3 community members selected by the board." "Yes, that's typical for local." "I want that changed," I interrupted quietly. "The committee will include 1 teacher nominated by the faculty, 1 veteran from the community, and 1 former scholarship recipient. No bank officials, no board appointees." Dawson's smile faded. "Ms. Porter, while we appreciate your contribution, the bank has certain protocols for administering. The bank will only be holding the funds in trust. Administration will be handled independently." I slid a revised document across the table. "I've also changed the selection criteria. Academic achievement will be considered, but priority will go to students demonstrating resilience in the face of economic or personal hardship." He glanced at the document without touching it. "That's rather subjective, don't you think?" "So is demonstrated leadership potential, which was your proposed primary criterion." I held his gaze steadily. "The scholarship will be named for my father, Sergeant James Porter, not for me or my company. And it will help students who need it most." Not those who look best on your promotional materials. Dawson shifted in his seat. Perhaps we should involve the board in these discussions. That won't be necessary, I said, my voice remaining calm. Either the terms are acceptable, or I'll establish the scholarship through a different institution. San Francisco has several excellent options. The mention of taking the money elsewhere had an immediate effect. Dawson's posture changed, his expression softening into something more accommodating. I'm sure we can work with your requests, he said, reaching for the document. $1 million will help many deserving students. 3 million, I corrected. I've decided to increase the endowment. His eyes widened. That's extremely generous. It's not generosity, I said, standing. It's investment in potential that others might overlook. I'll return Monday to sign the final paperwork. As I turned to leave, Dawson cleared his throat. Ms. Porter, there's a VIP reception before tonight's reunion events. As a significant donor to the community, we'd be honored if you'd attend. The mayor will be there, along with several business leaders. I paused at the door. Who's hosting? The Taylor family, at their lake house. Brittany's husband is, as you may know, considering a run for state senate. Of course, the Taylors. Brittany's family had owned half the commercial real estate in Lakeside for generations. Her father had once denied my mother a lease for the small bakery she dreamed of opening, claiming she lacked sufficient business acumen. What he meant was that single mothers of scholarship kids didn't fit his vision for downtown. I have a prior commitment, I said, but thank you for the invitation. Outside, the late afternoon light had turned golden, painting the town in a nostalgic glow it didn't deserve. I checked my watch, still 3 hours before the evening reunion events began. Time enough for one more stop. The drive to Lakeview Assisted Living took only 10 minutes. The facility sat on a hill overlooking the water, its grounds well-maintained but not lavish. At the reception desk, a young woman in scrubs looked up from her computer. I'm here to see Dorothy Harlow, I said. She checked her screen. Are you family? As good as, I replied. I'm Mackenzie Porter. Recognition dawned in her eyes. Oh, Miss Harlow mentions you often. She'll be so pleased. She's in the sunroom, end of the hall on the right. I followed her directions, passing through corridors with gentle lighting and the faint scent of cleaning products. The sunroom was warm and bright, filled with plants and comfortable furniture. Several residents sat reading or dozing in the saw. Late afternoon sun. In the corner, by the largest window, sat a woman in her 80s with silver hair pulled into a neat bun. Her hands, once strong enough to knead bread for hours, now rested thin and veined on the open book in her lap. She looked up as I approached, and her face transformed with a joy so pure it made my chest ache. Mackenzie, she breathed, reaching for me. My girl. I knelt beside her chair and took her hands in mine. Hi, Mom. My mother had moved to the assisted living facility 3 years ago after her stroke. I'd arranged for the best care, visited whenever I could, called daily. The facility staff knew me by name, though few in town connected Dorothy Harlow to Mackenzie Porter anymore. She'd reverted to her maiden name after my father died, a small act of reclaiming herself that I'd always respected. You look tired, she said, touching my cheek. Her stroke had affected her mobility but left her mind sharp as ever. The reunion? I smiled. You always could read me. Mothers see everything. She patted the chair beside her. Tell me. For the next hour, I told her about the reunion, the seating arrangement, the jet landing. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting between concern and amusement. You always did have a flair for the dramatic, she said when I finished. Just like your father. I wasn't trying to make a statement, I said. It was just logistics. I have meetings in New York tomorrow. She raised an eyebrow, an expression I'd inherited from her. And landing at the municipal airport wouldn't have worked because… I laughed softly. Okay, maybe there was a small statement involved. Her hand found mine again, her skin paper thin over blue veins. Honey, you have nothing to prove to those people. Not to Brittany Taylor with her family money, not to anyone who made you feel small. I know that. Do you? Her eyes, the same. Hazel as mine, studied my face. Then why are you here? Why not skip the reunion entirely? I considered her question, looking out at the lake where the setting sun had turned the water to flame. I thought I needed closure, to show them who I've become. And now? Now I realize they don't matter, I said slowly. They never did. What matters is what I do with what I've built, she nodded, satisfied. Your father used to say that power is only meaningful if it serves something beyond itself. The scholarship will help, I said. 3 million should support quite a few students like me. 3 million, she repeated, shaking her head in wonder. Remember when we celebrated finding an extra $20 in the couch cushions? Laughed together, and for a moment, I was that girl again, hopeful despite everything, determined to make her proud. Will you go tonight? She asked after a comfortable silence. I haven't decided. She squeezed my hand. Whatever you choose, remember who you are, not who they think you are, not even who you've become, who you've always been. As the sun began to set, a nurse appeared to remind my mother about her medication schedule. I kissed her cheek and promised to visit again before leaving town. Back. In my car, I sat for a long moment, watching the lights come on across the facility as evening approached. My phone buzzed with messages I continued to ignore. Instead, I called Cameron. What's our status? I asked when he answered. All set. Boss, jet's fueled and ready. Local authorities have been cooperative. Seems like half the town wants to see inside the aircraft. I smiled despite myself. Have you been comfortable? Are you kidding? The high school football coach gave me a tour of their trophy case and insisted I join the boosters' pre-reunion barbecue. I've eaten more pulled pork than should be legal. Glad to hear it. I started the car. I need you to prepare for departure. Tonight? I thought your New York meeting wasn't until… Not us. I need you to fly my mother to New York. Tonight. During the reunion. There was a brief pause. Your mother? She's at Lakeview Assisted Living. I've already cleared it with her doctors. The facility administrator will help with transport to the airfield. She'll need the bedroom suite prepared, and her medication schedule is in the blue folder in my briefcase. Copy that. And you? I looked toward the high school, its lights now visible against the darkening sky. I'll be along later. There's something I need to finish first. As I drove back toward town, the decision crystallized. I wouldn't attend the reunion reception with its forced small talk and sudden convenient recognition. I wouldn't give Brittany or Trent or any of them the satisfaction of my presence to validate their event. Instead, I had a different plan entirely. Pulled into the parking lot of Lakeside High School just as the caterers were unloading for the evening event. Workers in black uniforms carried trays and set up equipment through the side entrance, barely glancing my way. Perfect. In the quiet of my car, I made 3 phone calls. The first to my executive assistant in San Francisco, the second to a local business I'd researched that morning, and the third to Marcus. Can you meet me in 30 minutes? I asked when he answered. And bring your old yearbook if you still have it. Intriguing, he replied. Where? I watched as Brittany's red Mercedes pulled into the reserved space near the entrance, her distinctive silhouette visible through the windshield. The library, I said. Enter through the east doors. And Marcus, don't tell anyone I'm here? The Lakeside High Library hadn't changed much in 15 years. The same oak shelves lined the walls, the same motivational posters featuring celebrities holding books hung slightly crooked above the reference section. Even the scent remained identical, Old paper, furniture polish, and the faint chemical smell of dry erase markers from the adjoining study rooms. I sat at a table in the back corner, partially hidden by the biography section where few students ever ventured. Through the windows, I could see the parking lot filling with cars as more alumni arrived for the evening reception. Women in cocktail dresses and men in sports coats emerged, laughing too loudly, already performing the roles they'd come to play. The door opened quietly, and Marcus slipped in, clutching a worn blue yearbook under his arm. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis, dressed for the reunion but not trying too hard. That was always his way. "Cloak and dagger meetings in the library," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Very spy thriller." I smiled. "Old habits. I spent more lunches hiding in here than I did in the cafeteria." "I remember." He placed the yearbook on the table between us, his expression softening. "Senior year. You practically lived between these shelves." I ran my fingers over the embossed cover. "Lakeside Lions, 2010. The future awaits." Such a generic phrase for a year that had been anything but generic for me. "So what's the plan?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "Because landing your jet and then not showing up would be criminally anticlimactic." "Who says I'm not showing up?" I opened the yearbook, flipping through pages of smiling teenagers frozen in time. "I'm just not playing by their rules anymore." We found my senior photo near the back of the book. A serious-faced girl with hair pulled back severely, no makeup, no jewelry. The girl who couldn't afford the retouching package or the deluxe photo option. Beside my name was a single extracurricular listing, debate team captain. No mention of my state championship, my scholarship to West Point, my father's military service that had inspired my own path. In contrast, Brittany's photo spread across half a page. Cheerleading captain, homecoming queen, student council treasurer, most likely to succeed. Her quote read, "Don't be afraid to outshine everyone. It gives them something to aspire to." God, she was insufferable, Marcus muttered. "Still is, apparently." I turned to another page, where Trent's football action shot dominated the sports section. What happened to him after college? Besides pharmaceutical sales? Marcus snorted. 2 divorces, 1 DUI that his family connections made disappear, and a receding hairline he's fighting with expensive treatments. But he still wears that state championship ring like it's his only achievement. And it probably is, I said, closing the yearbook. From my bag, I withdrew a manila folder containing printouts of emails and financial documents. "Did you bring what I asked for?" He nodded, producing a small USB drive from his pocket. "Every digital yearbook photo, just like you requested, plus the candids that never made it into the final version. The school's server security is laughably outdated. You always were good with computers," I said, taking the drive. "Not billion-dollar good," he replied with a grin. "That was all you." I inserted the drive into my laptop and quickly scanned the files. Hundreds of photos, official portraits, sports events, dances, casual moments in hallways and classrooms. I found what I was looking for in a folder labeled Debate Finals. A series of photos showing me at the state championship podium, accepting the trophy no one at Lakeside had bothered to celebrate. "Perfect," I murmured, copying the files I needed. "Are you going to tell me what we're doing?" Marcus asked, watching me work. "Creating a different kind of entrance," I replied. "But I need one more thing first." I pulled out my phone and checked the time. Almost 7. The main reunion events would be starting soon, with Brittany undoubtedly making another speech. About class unity and shared history. "There's something I never told you about senior year," I said quietly, still focused on my laptop screen. "Something I never told anyone." Marcus waited, patient as always. "Remember when the school board threatened to cut the debate team funding? When we suddenly got that anonymous donation that saved the program?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it was like 15 grand out of nowhere. Everyone thought it was probably the Taylors or some other rich family trying to look charitable. It wasn't. I looked up from the screen. It was my mother. She took out a second mortgage on our already mortgaged house, worked triple shifts at the diner for months afterward, nearly lost everything. Marcus stared. Mac? Why would she? Because I told her debate was my only shot at a scholarship, because she believed in me when no one else did. I swallowed, hard. She never wanted me to know, but I found the paperwork when I was helping her move to assisted living. Understanding dawned in his eyes. And that's why you're really here. Not for them. For her. For her, I confirmed. And for every kid who's been seated at the equivalent of table 17. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant in San Francisco. Everything arranged as requested. Delivery in 10 minutes. East entrance. I stood, gathering my materials. Time to go. Are you coming? Marcus hesitated. My husband's waiting for me at the reception. He's never met these people. It might be awkward if I suddenly disappear. Bring him, I said. I'd like to meet the man who was smart enough to marry you. We exited through the library's side door, avoiding the main hallway where reunion attendees were gathering. Outside, the evening had fully arrived, wrapping the school in soft darkness broken only by the lights from inside and the dim glow of lampposts across the parking lot. A white van with lakeside catering emblazoned on the side pulled up to the east entrance. The driver, a young woman in her 20s, rolled down the window. Ms. Porter? I nodded. Right on time. She handed me a catering staff uniform, black pants and a white button-up shirt with the company logo. As requested, my boss says to tell. He remembers your mom from the diner. Whatever you're doing, he's happy to help. I thanked her and took the uniform. Small towns had their disadvantages, but loyalty to Dorothy Harlow wasn't one of them. Seriously? Marcus raised an eyebrow as I held up the shirt. You're going undercover as catering staff? That's your big entrance? Sometimes the best way to be seen is to be invisible first, I replied. Meet me inside in 20 minutes. Bring your husband and bring this. I handed him a small remote control with a single button. What does it do? It connects to the AV system. When I give you the signal, press it. He looked skeptical, but pocketed the device. This better be good. Trust me, I said. It will be. The catering uniform fit well enough, and with my hair pulled back and a pair of non-prescription glasses I kept for late-night coding sessions, I looked like any other service worker. I slipped in through the kitchen entrance, where real catering, staff bustled about preparing trays of appetizers and filling champagne flutes. You the extra help? A harried-looking man asked, barely glancing at me. Yes, I replied simply, picking up an empty tray. Where do you need me? Main gym. Champagne service. He thrust a tray of filled glasses at me. Try not to spill on anyone. Important. I nodded and pushed through the swinging doors into the gymnasium. The transformation was complete now. Twinkling lights, elegant table settings, a small orchestra in the corner playing subdued classical music. The basketball hoops had been draped with blue and gold fabric, and projector screens around the room displayed a rotating slideshow of then and now photos submitted by alumni. I scanned the room quickly. Approximately 200 people had gathered, standing in clusters or seated at round tables. Brittany held court near the small stage, resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than my mother's monthly care. Trent stood nearby, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing expansively as he regaled a group with some story. I moved through the crowd silently, offering champagne, invisible, despite being in plain sight. Fragments of conversation floated. Around me? Did you hear about the private jet? I heard it belongs to some tech billionaire. Brittany says she knows exactly who it is. Always knew someone from our class would make it big. No one looked at my face. No one recognized. The scholarship girl now worth more than most of their families combined. I was just another server, beneath notice. I worked my way toward the tech booth where a bored-looking DJ managed the sound system. My company badge, tucked inside my pocket, featured an IT security certification logo that looked official enough to most people who didn't examine it closely. "Hey," I said, approaching him. "I need to check the video input connection. Having some issues with the slide transitions." He shrugged, barely interested. "Whatever, just don't mess with the playlist." I plugged a small device into the back of his laptop, a secure USB drive containing the presentation I'd prepared in the library. The software automatically integrated it into the existing slideshow queue, set to activate with Marcus's remote. I finished. I spotted him entering with a tall man in a navy blazer, presumably his husband. They found a table near the back, and Marcus gave me a subtle nod. Right on schedule, Brittany tapped a knife against her glass, the sound cutting through the murmur of conversation. The room quieted as she ascended the small stage, microphone in hand. "Welcome back, Lions," she exclaimed, her voice carrying the same practiced enthusiasm she'd used for pep rallies 15 years ago. "Isn't tonight amazing? Look at all of us. Successful, accomplished, exactly what Lakeside High prepared us to be." Applause rippled through the room. I positioned myself near the back wall, tray held at precisely the right height to partially obscure my face. "Before we continue our evening of reconnecting and reminiscing," Brittany continued, "I have an exciting announcement. As many of you may have heard, there was quite a stir earlier when a private aircraft landed on our football field." Murmurs spread through the crowd. I caught Marcus's eye across the room, and he subtly held up the remote. "While we don't have confirmation yet," Brittany's voice took on a conspiratorial tone, "we have reason to believe one of our very own classmates has achieved extraordinary success. And in the spirit of Lakeside Pride, we'd like to honor all our successful alumni tonight." She gestured to the screens where her pre-selected slideshow began. Photos of classmates with their accomplishments captioned beneath. Doctors, lawyers, a minor local politician, a regional news anchor. All carefully curated to reflect well on Brittany's narrative of class achievement. I nodded slightly to Marcus. He pressed the button. The screens flickered momentarily, then changed. Instead of Brittany's approved slideshow, a different image appeared. A teenage girl in debate team attire, holding a state championship trophy. My younger self, focused and serious. Brittany faltered mid-sentence, confusion crossing her face as she realized the presentation had changed. The image changed again. My West Point graduation, then another, my military service photo in full dress uniform, then another, me receiving a commendation in Afghanistan. "We seem to be having technical difficulties," Brittany stammered, looking frantically toward the tech booth. But the images continued. Me with my cybersecurity team at our first major contract signing. The cover of Tech Innovator magazine with my profile. A news clip about veterans creating security solutions. My company headquarters in San Francisco. The final slide appeared. A split-screen image. On one side, Table 17 at the reunion with its single wilting daisy. On the other, my private jet on the football field. Between them, in simple text, Table 17, where they put Mackenzie Porter, combat veteran and CEO of Porter Secure. A hush fell over the room. Heads turned, people scanning the crowd, looking for me. But they were looking for the wrong version, the successful CEO in expensive clothes, not the unassuming server standing against the wall. I set down my tray, removed the glasses, and stepped forward into the light. Recognition rippled through the gymnasium like a stone dropped in still water. First from those nearest to me, then spreading outward in widening circles of stunned faces and whispered confirmations. Brittany stood frozen on stage, microphone. Clutched in a white-knuckled grip, her perfect smile collapsed into an expression of confusion that quickly morphed to calculation. I moved calmly through the crowd, which parted before me despite my catering uniform. The silence was heavier than any applause could have been, weighted with 15 years of assumptions suddenly proven wrong. Trent was the first to recover, stepping forward with his hand extended, his salesman's smile already in place. "Mackenzie, we were just talking about you. Congratulations on your incredible success." I looked at his hand but didn't take it. "Were you? Funny. I didn't hear my name mentioned once tonight. Just speculation about some tech billionaire with a private jet." His smile faltered but didn't disappear. Years of commission-based sales had taught him persistence. "Well, we didn't want to presume, but now that you're here, we should get you properly seated. Not at wherever you were earlier." "Table 17, I supplied. "Behind the column." A few uncomfortable coughs sounded from the crowd. Someone near the back muttered, "I told you that was messed up." Brittany finally descended from the stage, composure partially recovered, moving toward me with practiced grace. "Mackenzie, what a wonderful surprise! We had no idea you'd achieved so much. You should have told us about your company." "Why?" I asked simply. "Would it have changed where I was seated?" She laughed as if I'd made a joke, though the sound held no humor. "That was just an unfortunate oversight. You know how chaotic these events can be. But now you're here, and we'd be honored if you'd say a few words about your journey. Such an inspiration." The woman who hours ago had hidden me behind a column now wanted to showcase me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "I didn't come to give a speech," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the stillness, "or to be an inspiration. I came because I thought this place might still matter, that these connections might mean something." I glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of former classmates who had either ignored or tolerated me. Some looked ashamed. Others seemed calculating, already considering how my presence might benefit them. But then I remembered something my father taught me before his last deployment, I continued. He said that honor isn't found in recognition. It's built in the quiet moments when no one is watching, in the choices you make when there's no reward. My gaze returned to Brittany. "So I'm not here to celebrate 15 years of distance from this place. I'm here to honor what it taught me, sometimes inadvertently, about resilience. About seeing people for who they are, not what they can offer you." Marcus appeared at my side, his husband beside him. He squeezed my shoulder in silent support. "Tomorrow, the Sergeant James Porter Scholarship Fund launches with a $3 million endowment," I announced. "It will provide full rides to students who demonstrate exceptional character and resilience, regardless of their GPA or extracurricular profile. Students who might otherwise be seated at metaphorical table 17s. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Surprise, approval, and from some corners, the unmistakable sound of opportunism awakening. Trent cleared his throat. "That's incredibly generous, Mackenzie. Perhaps we could discuss having Taylor Pharmaceuticals contribute to the fund? A matching grant, perhaps?" Brittany nodded eagerly. "And the reunion committee would be honored to serve on the selection board. We know all the local families, after all." I smiled, not unkindly. "The board has already been established. Mrs. Harrington from the English department will chair it, along with representatives from Veterans Services and former scholarship recipients. No corporate sponsors, no social gatekeepers." Their expressions fell in near-perfect unison. I had denied them both the credit and the control they instinctively reached for. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "Now if you'll excuse me," I said, removing the catering company badge. "I have a plane to catch. My mother is waiting, and we have dinner reservations in Manhattan that I'd hate to miss." "Your mother?" Brittany looked genuinely startled. "Dorothy is here? I thought she moved away years ago." "She did," I replied. "She's currently flying in, my private jet to New York, where she'll be staying in my penthouse while receiving specialized treatment for her stroke recovery. The treatment your family's insurance company denied her 3 years ago, if I recall correctly. Brittany's husband, whom I recognized from campaign materials as the would-be state Senate candidate, shifted uncomfortably beside her. As the Awiisa current regional director for Midwest Health Partners, he would have been directly involved in that decision. "You've done very well for yourself," Brittany said stiffly, the pretense of warmth evaporating. "Yes," I agreed. "But more importantly, I've done well by others. That's the difference between us, Brittany. It always has been." I turned to leave, then paused, facing the room one last time. "The jet will be departing in 30 minutes. Anyone who was ever seated at their own version of Table 17 is welcome to come say goodbye. I'd be honored to know you." Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the gymnasium, Marcus and his husband falling into step beside me. Behind us, the crowd erupted in conversation, the controlled atmosphere of the reunion shattered by something more authentic. Outside, the night air felt clean and cool against my skin. The stadium lights illuminated my Gulfstream on the football field, its sleek form gleaming like a promise kept. "That," Marcus said as we walked toward the field, "was better than any revenge fantasy I could have imagined." I laughed, the sound surprisingly light. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the narrative. "And reclaim it you did," his husband added. Their faces when that slideshow started playing. The walk to the football field felt both longer and shorter than it should have, a strange compression of time and memory. Each step took me further from the person I'd been in those hallways and closer to the woman I'd become despite them. The stadium lights cast long shadows across the perfectly maintained grass, transforming ordinary objects into dramatic silhouettes against the darkened bleachers, where I'd once sat alone during pep rallies. My Gulfstream waited like an elegant sentinel, its polished exterior reflecting the lights in ripples of silver and blue. Cameron stood at the foot of the extended stairs, his posture professional, but his expression curious as he watched our approach. "Everything good, boss?" he asked when we were within earshot. "Better than good," I replied. "My mother?" "Settled, comfortably in the main cabin. The medical attendant says her vitals are perfect. She's been telling me stories about your high school debate tournaments for the last hour." I smiled, imagining my mother holding court in the luxurious cabin, probably sitting in my usual seat by the window. "That sounds about right." Behind us, the sound of footsteps on grass announced new arrivals. I turned to find a small group approaching hesitantly from the direction of the gymnasium. About a dozen people, most of whom I barely recognized, led by Mrs. Harrington with her distinctive, straight-backed walk. "Mackenzie," she called, "we wanted to see you off properly." As they drew closer, I began to place faces. Lisa Chen, who had shared her advanced calculus notes with me when I missed class to work extra hours at the grocery store. Darius Williams, the quiet kid from chemistry who had faced his own version of isolation. Robert Menendez, who had lost his father in Iraq the same year my father died in Afghanistan. Small connections I'd almost forgotten. People who had shown small kindnesses when they counted most. "Thank you for coming," I said, genuinely moved. Mrs. Harrington stepped forward. "That was quite a statement in there. Elegant but unmistakable." "I learned from the best," I replied. "Your literature classes taught me the power of showing rather than telling." She smiled, pleased. "And yet you've done both tonight. Shown your success and told them exactly what it means." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book. "I've been saving this for years, hoping I might see you again." I took it, turning it over in my hands. "Is this your essay on resilience from senior year? The one that won the state competition but wasn't announced at the awards assembly?" She nodded toward the school building. "Some narratives deserve preservation, even when others try to erase them." Emotion tightened my throat as I clutched the book. "Thank you." Darius stepped forward next, hands in his pockets, still carrying that same slight stoop to his shoulders. I just wanted to say, the scholarship thing. It matters. I'm teaching physics here now, and I see kids like us every year. The ones who don't fit the Brittany Taylor mold of success. You're teaching here? I asked, surprised. He nodded. Someone has to balance the scales. Each person had a similar story. Small resistances against the hierarchy that had shaped our adolescence, quiet commitments to making Lakeside incrementally better for the next generation of outsiders. They weren't revolutionaries or rebels, just decent people trying to level uneven ground. As we talked, I noticed additional movement at the edge of the field. A larger group had emerged from the gymnasium and stood watching from a distance. Brittany and Trent were visible among them, their postures stiff and uncertain. They made no move to approach, caught between the social imperative to chase influence and the reluctance to acknowledge their earlier behavior. "Looks like you've got an audience," Marcus murmured. "They always were spectators in other people's stories," I replied quietly. Cameron checked his watch. "We should prepare for departure if you want to make that dinner reservation, Ms. Porter," nodded, turning back to the small gathering of genuine connections. "Thank you all for coming. It means more than I can say." Mrs. Harrington embraced me briefly. "Go change the world, Mackenzie. You've already changed this small corner of it." One by one, they said goodbye, not with the awkward formality of the reunion inside, but with authentic warmth. Marcus was the last, pulling me into a fierce hug. "Don't be a stranger," he said. "My daughters should know a woman like you exists." "I'll be back," I promised. "The scholarship committee will need oversight, and my mother still loves that view of the lake." As he stepped back, I saw movement from the watching crowd. Brittany had finally broken away and was walking toward us, her husband trailing behind like an uncertain shadow. Her expression was difficult to read, a complex mixture of calculation, pride, and something that might have been genuine regret. I waited, neither advancing nor retreating. "Mackenzie," she said when she reached us, her voice carefully modulated. "I wanted to catch you before you left." I said nothing, allowing the silence to draw out her true purpose. What happened earlier, the seating arrangement, everything, it was unfortunate. She glanced back at her husband, who nodded encouragingly. "On behalf of the reunion committee, I want to apologize for the oversight." It was a politician's apology, passive voice, no direct accountability, framed as an unfortunate accident rather than a deliberate choice. I recognized the technique from countless corporate non-apologies I'd encountered in business. "Is that all?" I asked quietly. She blinked, clearly expecting me to accept the minimal offering. "Well, we'd also like to discuss the scholarship fund. My husband's campaign is focused on educational opportunities, and we'd be happy to feature your initiative in our platform." And there it was. The true purpose. Not reconciliation, but appropriation. "That won't be necessary," I said. "The fund operates independently of political affiliations." Her smile tightened. "You know, Mackenzie, success requires building bridges, not burning them. We could be powerful allies." I studied her face, still beautiful, still practiced in the arts of social manipulation, but somehow smaller than the giant she'd seemed in high school hallways. "Brittany," I said gently, "not everything is a transaction. Some things are simply about doing what's right because it's right." Her expression flickered with genuine confusion, as if I'd spoken in a language she couldn't quite translate. "Safe travels," she finally said, retreating to safer social territory. "Perhaps we'll see you at the 20-year reunion." I smiled. "Perhaps." She turned and walked back to her waiting audience, already adjusting her narrative for whatever came next. I watched her go, feeling neither triumph nor resentment, just a calm certainty that our paths had diverged so completely that they could never meaningfully intersect again. Cameron cleared his throat. "Ready when you are, boss." I nodded, turning toward the waiting aircraft. Let's go home. As I climbed the stairs, I paused at the top to look back at the school one last time. The building stood solid and unchanged, but my relationship to it had transformed completely. It was no longer a place of judgment or exclusion, but simply a chapter in a much larger story, one I was writing on my own terms. Inside, my mother looked up from her comfortable seat, her face brightening at my appearance. "There you are. Did you shake things up a bit?" I laughed, settling beside her and taking her fragile hand in mine. "You could say that." "Good," she said with satisfaction. "Some foundations need shaking." As the engines began their gentle hum, I gazed out the window at the shrinking figures on the field below. The night sky opened above us, vast and full of possibilities that Table 17 could never have contained. The Manhattan skyline materialized through wisps of cloud as we descended, a glittering constellation against the night. My mother pressed her palm to the window, eyes wide with wonder. In all her 76 years, she had never seen New York from above, had never watched the Empire State Building emerge from mist like something out of a dream. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice carrying the same quiet awe she'd had when I was a child, and she'd take me to the lake to watch fireflies on summer evenings, those rare nights when she wasn't working double shifts. "Wait until you see it from the penthouse," I replied, squeezing her shoulder gently. "The entire city looks like it's been laid out just for you." Cameron's voice came through the cabin speakers, professional but warm. "We're beginning our final approach to Teterboro. Current temperature is 68 degrees with clear skies. A car is waiting to take you into the city. Estimated arrival at your residence is approximately 40 minutes after landing." My mother turned from the window, her eyes finding mine. "You've built quite a life, Mackenzie." "We've built it," I corrected her. "Everything I am began with you." She shook her head, the gesture achingly familiar. "No, I gave you roots, but the heights, those are all yours." The plane touched down with barely a tremor, a testament to Cameron's skill. As we taxied toward the private hangar, I checked my phone for the first time since leaving the reunion. Dozens of notifications had accumulated, emails from my executive team, text messages from friends in San Francisco, news alerts about market fluctuations that might affect our upcoming contracts. And there, buried among the professional communications, was a message from Marcus. "It's everywhere. Check social media." I switched to my rarely used personal accounts and found them flooded with friend requests and messages. Dozens of posts tagged me. Former classmates suddenly remembering our special connection. Business acquaintances in Michigan claiming long-standing relationships. Local news outlets requesting interviews about the hometown success story. Most telling was a post from Brittany that had already garnered hundreds of likes. "So proud of my high school friend Mackenzie Porter and her incredible success. Lakeside Lions always support each other." Attached was a photo from the yearbook, one of the few that included both of us, though we stood at opposite ends of a debate team group picture. She had carefully cropped it to make it appear we were standing together. I showed my mother, who snorted softly. "Some people never change." "No," I agreed, putting the phone away as the aircraft came to a stop. "But we're not responsible for their growth, only our own." The door opened, revealing the crisp night air of New Jersey and the waiting car. A sleek black Mercedes with a medical transport package I'd arranged for my mother's comfort. The driver stood beside it, professional and discreet, while a medical attendant prepared the specialized seat for my mother's transfer. As we descended the stairs, my mother leaning slightly on my arm, I felt a peculiar lightness. Lakeside had dominated my thoughts for weeks leading up to the reunion, consuming mental energy I usually reserved for product development and strategic planning. Now it felt distant, not erased from my history, but properly contextualized. A chapter rather than the whole story. The drive into Manhattan offered spectacular views as we crossed the George Washington Bridge. The city spread before us like a jeweler's display case. My mother gasped when we turned onto my street in Tribeca and pulled up to the understated but unmistakably exclusive building where I'd purchased the top 2 floors 3 years ago. "This is where you live?" she asked as the doorman approached. "When I'm in New York," I replied, which is often enough to justify keeping it, but not so often that it feels like home. San Francisco has that honor. The penthouse welcomed us with warm lighting and the scent of fresh flowers, arrangements I'd ordered for my mother's arrival, featuring the lilacs she'd always loved but could rarely afford. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering cityscape, while the interior balanced modern luxury with comfortable touches that prevented it from feeling sterile. My mother moved slowly through the space, touching surfaces with reverent fingers. The marble countertops, the soft throw blankets, the spines of books arranged in the built-in shelves. Her eyes lingered on a framed photograph of my father in his dress uniform, positioned prominently on the mantel. "He would have been so proud," she said softly. "He was always proud," I corrected her, "even before there was anything tangible to be proud of. He believed in potential." She nodded, emotion briefly overtaking her. The scholarship, naming it for him, that was the right choice. It was the only choice. I moved to the kitchen, where the private chef I'd arranged had left dinner warming. "Are you hungry? We can eat on the terrace if you're not too tired." "I've been sitting in luxury for hours, being waited on hand and foot," she laughed. "I'm not tired at all." We ate under the stars, the city providing both view and soundtrack. My mother asked about my company, listened intently as I explained our latest security protocols and the government contracts that had established us as industry leaders. She shared updates about her physical therapy progress and the book club. She'd started at Lakeview Assisted Living. Neither of us mentioned the reunion until we were finishing dessert, a perfect creme brulee that made my mother close her eyes in appreciation. "What will you do about them?" she finally asked. "All those people suddenly remembering your existence." I considered the question, watching the lights of a helicopter traverse the sky above the financial district. "Nothing." "Nothing?" She raised an eyebrow. "Their posts and messages don't require my response." I set my spoon down beside the empty ramekin. "Their narrative isn't mine to manage." "And the scholarship? When they try to attach themselves to it, claim they always supported you?" I smiled. "The scholarship has clear parameters. Mrs. Harrington won't allow it to become a social currency for Brittany Taylor or anyone else, and the legal framework ensures it remains focused on students who need it most." My mother studied me across the table, her eyes, so similar to mine, filled with a mixture of pride and something like wonder. "When did you become so wise?" "I had an excellent teacher," I replied. "Later, after settling my mother into the guest suite designed specifically for her comfort, I stood alone on the terrace. New York pulsed below me, a city that never apologized for its ambition or its rough edges. So different from Lakeside, with its carefully maintained appearances and rigid social hierarchies. My phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. "Ms. Porter, there's been a development at the high school you should know about." Attached was a link to the Lakeside Tribune's website. The headline read, "Local Success Story Establishes $1 Million Scholarship, Snubs Former Classmates." I opened the article, expecting Brittany's version of events, but found something quite different. The reporter had interviewed several attendees of the reunion, including Mrs. Harrington and Darius, who provided detailed accounts of the losers' table incident and the slideshow revelation. A statement from the school superintendent announced an investigation into concerning allegations about the reunion organizing committee's behavior. Most surprising was a quote from Jessica Martin, the woman who had handed me my name tag with such dismissal. "What happened to Mackenzie Porter was deliberate and cruel. I was instructed to seat her at table 17 because we don't need her kind taking focus from our real success stories." I regret my participation and have resigned from the reunion committee effective immediately. The article ended with a statement from me that I had never given. Ms. Porter declined to comment, but her actions speak volumes. The Sergeant James Porter Scholarship Fund will benefit students regardless of social status or family connections, focusing instead on character and resilience, qualities Ms. Porter demonstrated long before her financial success. I smiled, recognizing Mrs. Harrington's elegant phrasing. She had always been skilled at finding exactly the right words. I closed the article without responding to Cameron. Whatever happened in Lakeside now, the inevitable defensiveness from Brittany, the political posturing from her husband, the performative, soul-searching from former classmates, none of it required my attention or energy. The night wind carried the faint sounds of the city upward, car horns, distant music, the eternal hum of human ambition. I leaned against the railing, feeling the cool metal beneath my palms, and looked toward the horizon where the dark silhouette of buildings met the star-scattered sky. Table 17 had been meant as an ending, a final dismissal. Instead, it had become a beginning, the catalyst for something far more meaningful than mere revenge or recognition could ever be. I took a deep breath of the night air and went inside, closing the door softly behind me. Tomorrow would bring meetings and decisions, strategy sessions, and innovation challenges. The work that mattered, done for reasons that had nothing to do with high school hierarchies or small-town approval. Morning in New York arrived with golden light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting warm rectangles across the hardwood floors. I had been awake for hours already, responding to emails from my West Coast team and finalizing the presentation for my afternoon meeting with the Department of Defense. The penthouse was quiet except for the soft hum of the espresso machine and the distant sounds of traffic 17 floors below. I heard my mother before I saw her. The soft shuffle of slippers against hardwood, the subtle clearing of her throat. That had always signaled her presence since I was a child. "You still wake up at dawn," she observed, entering the kitchen in the silk robe I'd bought her last Christmas, but she'd never had occasion to wear. Some things never change. I smiled, pouring her a cup of coffee. Old habits. The military reinforced what you instilled. She accepted the cup with a nod of thanks, moving to the window to take in the view. Manhattan bathed in morning light, already pulsing with energy despite the early hour. "Have you seen the news?" she asked, nodding toward my tablet on the counter. "About Lakeside?" "Yes." The story had evolved overnight. The local coverage had been picked up by regional outlets, then transformed by social media into something broader, a conversation about privilege, exclusion, and redemption. Hashtags had emerged. Table 17 and private jet revenge. Someone had created a meme of my jet with the caption, "How it started versus how it's going," that had gone viral among business and tech accounts. Most surprising was an opinion piece in the Detroit Free Press titled, "The Tables We Assign: What One Reunion Reveals About American Meritocracy." The author had used the incident to explore how social gatekeeping persists long after high school, shaping access to opportunities in ways both obvious and subtle. "You've become quite the symbol," my mother remarked, scrolling through the coverage on my tablet. "Though I notice you haven't commented on any of it." "I don't need to," I replied, joining her at the window. "The scholarship speaks for itself." She studied my face with the insight that had always made hiding anything from her impossible. "You never wanted revenge, did you?" "Not really." I considered the question, watching a ferry make its way across the Hudson River, sunlight glinting off its wake. Not revenge. Reclamation, maybe. Of narrative, of power, of the truth about who I was then and who I am now. "And who are you now?" she asked softly. "Still the girl who grew up watching you work 3 jobs to keep our lights on. Still the soldier who learned that true strength often comes disguised as vulnerability." I turned to face her fully. "Just with better resources now." Her eyes, so like mine, crinkled at the corners as she smiled. Resources you've earned. My phone chimed with a notification, a text from Marcus with a photo attached. It showed the high school marquee with new lettering. Congratulations to the inaugural recipients of the Sergeant James Porter Scholarship Fund. Applications open Sept 15. That was fast, my mother remarked, looking at the image over my shoulder. Mrs. Harrington doesn't waste time, I replied. She never did. We spent the morning together in comfortable familiarity, my mother exploring the penthouse while I finished. My work, occasionally calling me to show me a view or ask about a piece of art. Around 11, her doctor arrived for the consultation I'd arranged, bringing specialized therapy options unavailable in Michigan. As they discussed treatment plans in the guest suite, I stepped onto the terrace with my phone. 3 calls in quick succession, my COO in San Francisco, my lead developer in Austin, and finally, somewhat surprisingly, my attorney in Michigan. The school board is inquiring about a formal dedication ceremony for the scholarship, he informed me. They're suggesting next month, when school resumes. I leaned against the railing, watching clouds drift between skyscrapers. What's your read on their motivation? Damage control, primarily. The story has gained traction beyond what anyone anticipated. They want to show they're on the right side of it. And Brittany, the reunion committee? Conspicuously absent from the planning discussions, the superintendent has distanced himself completely from their actions. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Tell them I'll consider it, depending on my schedule. But the focus must remain on the students who'll benefit, not on me or my company. Understood. And the other matter we discussed? He meant the gallery space in downtown Lakeside, a struggling arts center I'd quietly purchased through my foundation last month. Proceed as planned. Renovations to begin in September. Community programs by January. After ending the call, I remained on the terrace, letting the gentle breeze cool my thoughts. My mother joined me a few minutes later, her expression bright, with optimism after her consultation. Good news? I asked. The best, she confirmed. He believes I can regain almost full mobility with the right therapy protocol. Says I'm remarkably resilient for a woman my age. I smiled. He clearly knows what he's talking about. She settled into one of the terrace chairs, arranging herself with the careful precision of someone still adjusting to physical limitations. So what happens now, Mackenzie? With Lakeside, with all of it? I considered her question, watching a helicopter navigate between buildings in the distance. Life continues. The scholarship helps students who need it. I run my company. You get stronger. And the reunion drama? The suddenly friendly former classmates becomes a story people tell at parties, I said with a slight shrug. Maybe a cautionary tale about the tables we choose to put people at. She nodded slowly, understanding what I wasn't saying, that I had already moved beyond it, that the reclamation was complete, not because I had proven anything to them, but because I no longer needed to. Your father would say you've outflanked them, she observed with a small smile. Military strategy was his specialty, I agreed. We fell into comfortable silence, 2 women who had weathered more than their share of storms, now sitting above the city in peaceful reflection. After a while, my mother reached across the small table between us and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I'm proud of you, she said simply. Not because of this. She gestured at the penthouse, the view, the implicit success it represented, but because of who you chose to be when the spotlight finally found you. I squeezed her hand gently. I had an excellent example. The rest of the day unfolded with purposeful momentum. My DoD presentation delivered virtually from the penthouse, office dinner reservations at my mother's favorite celebrity chef's restaurant, plans finalized for her specialized therapy regimen. Lakeside and its drama receded with each hour, not forgotten but properly contextualized within the broader landscape of a life built on purpose rather than approval. 3 months passed like wind through open fingers. Autumn painted Central Park in amber and crimson as I divided my time between New York and San Francisco, balancing company leadership with overseeing my mother's treatment progress. She flourished under the specialized therapy program, regaining strength and mobility that her doctors in Michigan had deemed permanently lost. We celebrated small victories: her first unassisted walk across the penthouse, her return to knitting, the day she managed to prepare an entire meal without resting. "It's the view," she joked one evening as we shared tea on the terrace, the city lights blinking to life below us. "Hard to stay down when you're looking out at something this magnificent." I knew better. It wasn't the view, but her own determination. The same quiet resilience that had kept our lights on and food on the table when I was growing up. The same strength that had helped her survive my father's death and her own health challenges. The Porter backbone, as my father used to call it. Lakeside became a distant echo, occasionally rippling into our consciousness through updates from Marcus or news alerts about the scholarship program. The Foundation's board, led by Mrs. Harrington, had selected the first 5 recipients, students with circumstances that mirrored my own 15 years earlier. One girl, the daughter of a single mother working 3 jobs, had written an essay about studying by flashlight to save on electricity that hit so close to home I had to step away from my desk after reading it. The media narrative evolved predictably. After the initial viral buzz faded, more thoughtful analyses emerged, examining the intersection of social class, education, and opportunity in small-town America. A documentary filmmaker from Detroit contacted me about including the scholarship story in a broader project about economic mobility. I declined to be interviewed, but connected them with Mrs. Harrington and the scholarship recipients instead. Brittany's social media underwent a calculated transformation. Gone were the performative friendship posts tagging me. In their place appeared earnest reflections on growth and learning from past mistakes. Her husband's campaign literature now featured prominently positioned statements about educational equity and supporting students from all backgrounds. Marcus sent me a photo of their new yard signs with the slogan, "Building tables where everyone has a seat." "Irony is dead," he texted alongside the image. I didn't respond. Their rebranding required neither my blessing nor my attention. October. Brought the official scholarship dedication ceremony at Lakeside High. I didn't attend in person but arranged for my mother to represent the family, accompanied by a security detail and Marcus as her personal guide. She sent me photos throughout the day, the new plaque bearing my father's name and military rank, the 5 scholarship recipients standing proud in their Sunday best, Mrs. Harrington at the podium speaking about potential and perseverance. Brittany tried to corner me for a photo op, my mother reported during our evening call. I told her my physical therapist advises against sudden, insincere embraces. I laughed, picturing the scene. "You didn't." "I most certainly did." That husband of hers turned 3 shades of red. Later that night, she sent one final image, herself standing beside my father's memorial at the Veterans Monument, her hand resting on his engraved name, her posture straighter than it had been in years. The text read simply, "We did good. Mac." November brought an unexpected development. The gallery space I'd purchased in downtown Lakeside completed its renovation ahead of schedule. The Foundation's plan, to convert it into a combined arts center and technology training facility for underserved youth, had expanded to include a business incubator program for first-generation entrepreneurs. "They're calling it Porter Innovation Commons," Marcus informed me during our weekly call. "Sign went up yesterday. Brittany's real estate company tried to claim they had donated the building, but the Tribune ran a fact-check piece within hours." I smiled at the thought of the local paper finding its investigative voice. "How are the classes filling up?" "Waiting list for everything." "You should see these kids, Mac. They come in with these ideas, these dreams. It's like watching little versions of you walk through the door." The image warmed something deep within me. Not pride exactly, but satisfaction. A circle completing itself in the most meaningful way possible. December arrived with snow in New York and an invitation I hadn't expected. The White House's annual Veterans Innovation Summit requested my participation on a panel about transitioning military skills to entrepreneurship. The event coincided with my mother's final evaluation with her specialist, marking the completion of her intensive therapy program. "You should go," she insisted when I hesitated. "I can manage one doctor's appointment on my own." "That's not the point," I replied. "I want to be there for the milestone." She fixed me with the look that had corrected my course since childhood. "Mackenzie, you've done enough standing still for me. Go show them what a girl from table 17 can really do." The White House glowed golden against the December twilight, holiday decorations lending it a warmth that belied the formal security protocols and political gravity within. I passed through multiple checkpoints, credentials verified at each station by agents whose practiced neutrality never wavered. The Veterans Innovation Summit had drawn an eclectic mix of attendees: military brass in full-dress uniforms, tech entrepreneurs in carefully casual attire, policymakers who moved with the deliberate purpose of people accustomed to being noticed. I wore a simple navy suit, my father's service pins displayed discreetly on the lapel. No designer labels, no ostentatious jewelry, just clean lines and quality tailoring. The choices were deliberate, a visual statement about substance over spectacle. The East Room had been transformed into a conference space, with rows of chairs facing a stage where the presidential seal hung prominently. Attendees networked in clusters, business cards exchanging hands with practiced efficiency. I recognized several faces from industry publications and Pentagon briefings, competitors, potential partners, government officials whose decisions affected contract allocations. "Ms. Porter," a voice called from behind me. I turned to find Admiral Jackson, the head of naval cybersecurity operations and a frequent client of my company. "Glad you could make it. Your panel is generating significant interest." We exchanged pleasantries as he guided me toward a smaller reception area where panelists were gathering. "The Secretary is particularly interested in your perspective on transitioning classified security protocols to civilian applications," he added, lowering his voice slightly. "The breach last month has everyone on edge." I nodded, understanding the subtext. My company had been instrumental in identifying vulnerabilities after a significant hack of transportation infrastructure systems. "I'm happy to share our findings within appropriate boundaries." The panel itself lasted 90 minutes, a substantive discussion of how military experience shapes entrepreneurial approaches to problem solving. I spoke about pattern recognition developed in combat zones, about building resilient systems that anticipate rather than merely react to threats, about leading teams through uncertainty with clarity and purpose. "Many veterans struggle with the transition to civilian life," the moderator noted, directing her gaze toward me. "Yet you built a billion-dollar company within 5 years of leaving service. What was different in your approach?" I considered the question, aware of the cameras capturing every micro-expression. I didn't see it as a transition to something entirely new, but as a continuation of the same mission, protecting people and securing vital systems. The uniform changed. The purpose didn't. After the formal proceedings concluded, the real work began. The informal conversations in corners, the exchange of ideas away from microphones and cameras. A senator wanted to discuss potential legislation around AI security standards. A venture capitalist sought insights on emerging threats in quantum computing vulnerabilities. A military contractor proposed a collaboration on next-generation encryption protocols. I navigated each interaction with practiced ease, present and engaged, while maintaining appropriate boundaries. This world of power and influence operated by different rules than Lakeside High School, but the fundamental dynamics weren't so different. Who was included? Who was excluded? Who defined the parameters of belonging? The difference was that I now helped set those parameters rather than struggling to meet them. As the evening wound down, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. A text from my mother included a photo of her standing unassisted in front of the Christmas tree in my penthouse, her posture straight, her smile triumphant. Doctor says 92% recovery. Who needs that last 8% anyway? I smiled, feeling a knot of tension release. Her appointment had gone well. A second message arrived from Marcus. Thought you might appreciate this. Attached was a newspaper clipping. From the Lakeside Tribune. The headline read, "Former Table 17 student speaks at White House Summit." Beneath it, a photo of me from the company website, and a brief article about the Porter Innovation Commons expanding programs. I was still looking at it when a Secret Service agent approached discreetly. "Ms. Porter? The president would like a word before you depart." The private meeting was brief but substantive. Questions about cyber threats to election infrastructure, concerns about foreign actors targeting military family data, an invitation to join a specialized task force being formed in the new year. "Your perspective would be valuable," the president concluded, "both as a security expert and as someone who understands what's at stake for ordinary Americans." "I'd be honored to contribute," I replied, meaning it. As I was escorted out through the colonnade, snow had begun to fall, transforming the rose garden into something from a postcard. I paused for a moment, watching the white flakes dance against the dark sky, and thought of my father. He would have been amused by the day's events, his stubborn daughter advising presidents and building technological shields against invisible enemies. The car waiting to take me to the airport was sleek and warm, the driver discreet behind the privacy partition. As we pulled away from the White House, my phone rang. An unknown Michigan number. "Ms. Porter? This is Principal Sanderson from Lakeside High School." The voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother you, especially today, but we have a situation with one of the scholarship recipients that I thought you should know about." I listened as he explained. Emma Torres, the girl whose essay had moved me to tears, had been offered early admission to West Point but couldn't afford the preparatory expenses, the specialized training, equipment, transportation to required events. "The scholarship covers tuition, but these additional costs fall outside our parameters," he explained. "Her mother is facing medical bills after an accident at the factory, and they're at risk of losing their housing." "What does Emma need exactly?" I asked, already opening my laptop. He named a sum that would have seemed astronomical to my 18-year-old self, but was now equivalent to a rounding error in my quarterly earnings. "Consider it handled," I said. "And Principal Sanderson? Set up a contingency fund for all the scholarship recipients. $20,000 each for incidentals that fall outside the formal parameters. No applications needed, no committees to convince. Just direct access when obstacles arise." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. "That's extraordinarily generous." "No," I corrected him gently. "It's extraordinarily practical. Talent is universal. Opportunity shouldn't depend on which table someone sits at." After ending the call, I leaned back against the leather seat, watching the monuments of Washington pass by my window. In a few hours, I would be back in New York, celebrating my mother's recovery milestone. Tomorrow would bring meetings and decisions, strategy sessions, and innovation challenges. But for now, in the quiet of the car, I allowed myself a moment of recognition. The journey from Table 17 to the White House hadn't been linear or inevitable. It had been built choice by choice, day by day, from the girl studying by flashlight to save on electricity to the woman whose security systems now protected critical infrastructure. I opened my email and began composing a message to Emma Torres. Not platitudes about hard work or generic encouragement, but specific practical advice about navigating West Point as a scholarship student. The kind of insight I would have treasured at her age. Some tables are built to exclude. Others are built to elevate. The difference lies not in their construction, but in who controls the blueprint. Spring arrived in New York with a gentleness that belied the city's reputation for harshness. Cherry blossoms framed the walkways in Central Park, and morning light softened the steel and glass canyon of Midtown as I walked to a breakfast meeting with potential investors. The past months had unfolded with steady purpose: company expansion into European markets, my mother's continued recovery, the Porter Innovation Commons in Lakeside reaching capacity with its programs. My phone buzzed with a notification as I waited at a crosswalk. An email from Emma Torres, the scholarship recipient headed to West Point, contained photos of her recent visit to the academy. Her face glowed with pride and determination as she stood in front of the historic buildings, where I had once found my own path. The subject line read simply, "Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you." I smiled, typing a quick response of encouragement before entering the restaurant where 3 venture capitalists waited to discuss my company's latest security protocol. The meeting proceeded with the familiar rhythm of high-stakes business: technical, questions disguised as casual inquiries, subtle positioning for favorable terms, the dance of power and capital that undergirded innovation in America. The Department of Defense implementation exceeded expectations, I explained, referring to the cybersecurity framework we'd developed after the White House summit. We're seeing application potential across critical infrastructure sectors. The lead investor, a woman in her 60s whose reputation for brutal honesty preceded her, studied me over steepled fingers. "And the military connection? That's your background, correct?" 8 years, 2 tours, I confirmed. The company's foundations were built on protocols I developed during deployment. She nodded, satisfied with something unspoken. "You understand risk differently when you've had skin in the game. Real risk, not just financial exposure." The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of term sheets, another step in the company's evolution from startup to institution. As I exited onto Madison Avenue, my assistant called with updates about the afternoon's schedule: a video conference with the European team, final review of a government contract, preparations for my keynote at next week's security conference in Singapore. Also, she added, Marcus Lewis from Michigan called. Said it wasn't urgent, but thought you'd want to know there's been a development with the school board. I frowned slightly. What kind of development? He didn't specify, just asked you to call when you had a moment. I found a quiet corner in a nearby park and dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the particular warmth of old friendship. "Mac! Thanks for calling back. How's New York treating you?" We exchanged brief pleasantries before he came to the point. The reason I called: Brittany's husband lost the special election for state senate. Pretty decisively, actually. I hadn't been following it, I admitted. Nobody was. That's part of the story, Marcus continued. But here's where it gets interesting. He's taking a position with the school board instead, Director of Community Development. And his first initiative? A proposal to rename the Porter Innovation Commons. I felt a flicker of irritation but kept my voice neutral. On what grounds? Official reason is streamlining branding across district properties. They want to call it the Lakeside Future Leader Center, or some generic corporate nonsense. His disgust was evident. Unofficially, the Taylor family is still smarting from the Table 17 fallout. Your name on that building is a daily reminder of the reunion incident. The building doesn't belong to the district, I noted. The foundation owns it outright. Exactly, which is why this is so absurd. But they're leveraging relationships with local businesses, suggesting partnerships might be reconsidered if they don't support the unified community vision. I absorbed this information, watching a young family navigate the park pathways, a toddler taking unsteady steps between patient parents. Has Mrs. Harrington heard about this? Heard about it? She's leading the resistance. Marcus chuckled. Showed up at the board meeting with 15 years of receipts, literal and figurative. Documented every instance the Taylor family tried to undermine scholarship students, every donation they mysteriously failed to make despite public promises. I smiled, picturing my former English teacher marshalling evidence with the same precision she once used to analyze Shakespearean motives. And the board's response? Tabled the discussion pending further community input. Translation: they didn't expect pushback and don't know how to proceed without alienating either the Taylors or the growing factions supporting the programs you've funded. I considered the situation, feeling neither anger nor anxiety, just a calm clarity about what mattered. The name is secondary to the mission. The programs are what count, not what's on the building. That's what I figured you'd say, Marcus replied. But there's more. Emma Torres, she organized the other scholarship recipients. They're collecting signatures supporting the current name, sharing stories about how the Commons has changed their trajectories. Something warm expanded in my chest. Not pride exactly, but a deep satisfaction. These students weren't just receiving opportunity, they were learning to advocate for themselves and others. The true legacy wasn't a name on a building, but the ripple effect of empowerment spreading through a community that had long accepted rigid hierarchies as natural law. Tell them I appreciate their initiative, I said, but also remind them to stay focused on their primary goals. Fighting symbolic battles can consume energy better spent on substantive progress. After ending the call, I sat for a few extra minutes, in the spring sunshine, contemplating the situation in Lakeside. Brittany and her husband were still fighting old battles, still defining success through control and recognition rather than impact. Their approach felt increasingly small and distant from the path I had chosen. My phone buzzed again. My mother this time, sending a photo of herself in the kitchen of my penthouse, triumphantly holding a freshly baked pie. First one since the stroke, your father's favorite recipe. We'll save you a slice. The image provided perfect perspective. Whatever happened with building names in Lakeside, whatever symbolic victories the Taylors might temporarily claim, the real victory was already secure. In programs that changed lives, in students breaking cycles of limitation, in my mother's hands steady enough to crimp a perfect pie crust. Some fights weren't worth the energy they consumed. Some tables weren't worth sitting at, no matter how elaborately they were set. I stood, straightening my jacket, and continued toward my next meeting, focused on building rather than battling, on creating rather than correcting, on the future rather than the past. 1 year after the reunion, I found myself back in Michigan. Not Lakeside specifically, but Ann Arbor, where I'd been invited to deliver the commencement address at the University of Michigan's College of Engineering. The campus bloomed with early summer flowers, graduation decorations adorning every building, as excited families navigated the grounds with maps and cameras. My mother accompanied me, her recovery now so complete that strangers would never guess she'd suffered a stroke. She sat in the front row during the ceremony, her silver hair elegant against a blue dress I'd never seen before. A purchase she'd made independently, a small but significant marker of her returned autonomy. "Remember to breathe," she'd advised as we prepared that morning in our hotel suite. "And don't worry about impressing anyone. Just tell them something true." The truth I shared with those graduates wasn't about private jets or billion-dollar valuations. It wasn't about revenge or recognition. Instead, I spoke about resilience as a practice rather than a trait, about success as contribution rather than accumulation, about tables, both literal and metaphorical, and who controls access to them. The world will attempt to assign you seats based on criteria that often have nothing to do with your capabilities or character, I told them. Your power lies not in fighting for better placement at those tables, but in recognizing when to build your own. Afterward, during the reception, a line of students waited to speak with me. Most asked about career paths and industry trends, but one young woman, her graduation cap decorated with the words, "First in Family," asked something different. "Was there a moment when you stopped feeling like an imposter?" she questioned, her voice quiet but direct. "When you knew you truly belonged in the rooms where decisions happen?" I considered her question carefully, seeing in her eyes the same determination I'd once carried. I stopped asking if I belonged, I finally answered, and started asking if the room deserved my presence. It shifts the equation entirely. She nodded slowly, understanding filtering across her expression. Thank you, that actually helps. That evening, my mother and I dined at a small Italian restaurant near campus. The space hummed with celebration as other families marked graduation, milestones, their conversations flowing around us in a comforting ambient soundtrack. You know, my mother said, twirling pasta around her fork with the dexterity she'd worked months to regain. I've been thinking about what's next. For the scholarship program? I asked. For me. She set down her fork, meeting my gaze directly. The therapy's complete. I'm as recovered as I'm going to get, which is considerably better than anyone predicted. And while the New York penthouse is lovely, it's not home. I felt a small twinge of concern. Are you thinking of returning to Lakeside? She shook her head. No, that chapter's closed. But I've been corresponding with Rosalind Walker. You remember? My college roommate who retired to San Francisco? The botany professor. I nodded, recalling the Christmas cards we'd received throughout my childhood from the woman my mother had once described as the sister I never had. She's involved with a community garden program for veterans in the Bay Area. They're looking for program coordinators. My mother's eyes brightened with purpose. It combines everything I love: plants, teaching, being useful, and it would put me just across the bay from you. Understanding dawned. You want to move to California? I want to start a new chapter, she clarified. At 77, that might seem ridiculous to some, but if there's one thing this past year has taught me, it's that rebuilding is always possible. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand, throat tight with emotion. I think it's perfect. Later that night, after returning my mother to her hotel room, I walked alone through the campus grounds. Students celebrated in clusters, their laughter carrying across the warm evening air. Tomorrow they would pack up dorm rooms and apartments, disperse across the country to begin professional lives filled with both promise and uncertainty. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw your commencement speech online? Powerful stuff. Also, update on the naming dispute. Board voted unanimously to keep Porter Innovation Commons. Turns out, Brittany's husband had bigger problems than building names. Financial audit found some creative accounting with campaign funds. He's resigned from the board. I wasn't surprised. Systems built on appearance rather than substance eventually revealed their foundations. I typed a brief acknowledgement to Marcus, then continued my walk, enjoying the anonymity of being just another visitor on a campus filled with commencement guests. Near the engineering building, a small group of graduates still in their caps and gowns had gathered around a bench. One played guitar softly while others talked in low voices, savoring these final moments of collegiate camaraderie before life scattered them to different cities and circumstances. As I passed, I overheard a fragment of conversation that made me smile. My mom worked 3 jobs to get me here, a young woman was saying. Tomorrow she's watching her first college graduate. Table 17 can kiss my entire engineering degree. I paused, startled by the familiar reference. The phrase had apparently entered the lexicon, transcending its origins to become shorthand for overcoming exclusion. These students were too young to know about my high school reunion, yet here they were, invoking Table 17 as a symbol of obstacles conquered rather than humiliation endured. I continued walking, something settling in my chest like the final piece of a complex puzzle finding its place. The story had evolved beyond my control, beyond my experience, becoming something bigger and more meaningful in its journey through other lives and perspectives. Back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop to check final details for tomorrow's flight back to San Francisco. A notification appeared, an email from the Porter Innovation Commons staff containing their quarterly impact report. 67 students had completed coding certification. 35 new businesses had launched through the incubator program, and 4 patents had been filed by participants previously unable to access intellectual property protection. Numbers on a page, representing lives in transformation. Tables being built, rather than places being sought at existing ones. I closed the laptop and moved to the window, looking out at the Michigan night. Somewhere in Lakeside, Brittany was likely navigating the fallout of her husband's financial improprieties, calculating her next strategic social move. The thought carried no satisfaction or resentment, just a quiet recognition of paths that had diverged so completely they could never meaningfully intersect again. My journey from Table 17 had never really been about proving my worth to those who had assigned that seat. It had been about recognizing that worth had never been theirs to assign in the first place. 5 years after the reunion, I returned to Lakeside one last time, not for another gathering or ceremony, but to witness Emma Torres, the first Porter, scholar, commission as an officer at her West Point graduation. She'd invited my mother and me personally, her letter filled with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her path. The ceremony was magnificent against the backdrop of the Hudson River, cadets in perfect formation beneath a cloudless sky. Emma stood tall among them, her posture reflecting the discipline and purpose she'd cultivated. When she received her gold bars, her mother, who once worked the same factory line as mine, wept with pride. Afterward, as families celebrated across the grounds, Emma approached us with another young woman at her side. "Ms. Porter," she said, "this is my roommate Alicia. She's from Lakeside too." I shook Alicia's hand, noting the quiet determination in her eyes. "Emma told me your story," Alicia said. "About the reunion and Table 17. It's why I applied to the academy." "My story?" She nodded. "My guidance counselor said it was a waste of time. Kids like me don't get into places like this." But then she showed me your speech from Michigan, about building your own tables. Something profound settled within me as I realized the true power of what had happened. Not the private jet moment, or the vindication, but the permission it gave others to reject limitations imposed by those who never had the right to define them. That evening, on the flight back to San Francisco, my mother dozed peacefully beside me while I watched darkness blanket the country below. In the quiet of that moment, I understood that some stories transcend their origins, becoming vessels for others to carry forward in ways we never anticipated. Table 17 hadn't been an ending. It had been a beginning, not just for me, but for Emma, for Alicia, for countless others who recognized themselves in that moment of exclusion transformed into empowerment. If you've ever been seated at your own version of Table 17, this story is for you. Remember, true power isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your narrative and building spaces where others can find theirs. Like and subscribe for more stories that remind us all. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its deepest disappointments.